Welcome to the Independent Artist Podcast, sponsored by the National Association of Independent Artists.
Also sponsored by Zapplication. I'm Will Armstrong, and I'm a mixed media artist.
I'm Douglas Sigworth, glassblower. Join our conversations with professional working artists.
Well, folks, here we are back on the podcast. It's been a couple of weeks since we have last talked. It's been a busy one for Douglas and myself. Douglas, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing fine. I'm back up here in Minnesota and just dragged myself in from the studio out there. I'm set up in a barn, which is awesome for the space. I've got it all cleaned out until I hung my work at my last show and realized that it's dropping things from the roof.
Oh, you're kidding.
Like little sections of I don't know, it's insulation or bird shit or spiders.
So are you taking mixed media to a whole new level now here? Or what?
Yeah, it's my organic phase.
Fingernail clippings, hair.
Yeah. It's funny because some of my newer pieces that were hanging in the booth, I was looking in horror at them and checking out some of these little brown, little tasty morsels that are in the varnish. And I'm looking down the street and there's not really anybody there yet. My across the street neighbor is watching me as I bust out the paint and start painting with my thumb. Just there were only 5 or 6 little spots, but
had to fix it. Right? Had to fix it.
You got to fix it. Organic, fluid nature of my work enables me to do so. I can't imagine that you'd be able to do the same thing.
No, can't do any on the street finishing touches. It goes back in the bin. We take it home and fix it then. But
every media has its pros and cons, friends.
It sure does. It sure does. But I was happy to come stop by your booth there in Denver and saw some really great new pieces. I'm really excited with what you had to show. It was great.
I appreciate that. You made it by on Monday morning, and man, I felt bad because here comes Douglas hobbling down the street, and I'm like, did I get out there on my own 2 good feet? No, I didn't. So sorry about that, but thanks for stopping by.
I have Renee's in the booth. She said, not much is happening. Go say hi. So that was good. It was a good trek. I think I clocked in at 10,000 steps that day. So
good God.
I'm getting stronger.
Yeah, I saw the directors. I feel like Amy Curley said something about her steps as well. I don't count those. I just don't
have one of these fancy watches that tell you if you're moving or not.
No, I have enough people telling me what to do. I don't need any technology. So
one more thing to tell to fuck off.
Right. Yeah, how long before he breaks it? That'll be the game we play with my technology. All right. So we've got a special show where it's just going to be my special guest today on the podcast, folks, is me and Doug.
There you go.
So we're going to do one of those episodes where we answer some questions, but let's hit the kind of preamble and catch up. We've got some catching up to do.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's a long drive to Denver. It's 2 days for us. Here's
a question that I have for you. What's your maximum daytime driving? Like, what do you guys do? What do you like to do? How long is the drive to Denver, and how do you guys break it up?
900 miles for us, so that's like a day and a half. I don't like to drive longer than 12 hours.
Okay.
So, I start getting a little dozy, but sure, we can trade off. So, I mean, that's the good thing where, I used to be on my own, and that's hard. That's just a nightmare.
So 12 is your maximum. Once it's more than 12, that's a 2-dayer?
It depends on the logistics on the road. I mean, the mountains are past Denver, which, we got to drive through the mountains this week. So that's a whole different ballgame than if it's flat. But actually,
Gotcha.
Funny story that you brought up about going to Denver there. So we had expected to get to a certain benchmark. And for some reason, I just followed our Google Maps, our navigation, without thinking about it and just head off the way. Well, it took us a different route. It took us through Sioux City and from Sioux City to North Platte. Well, once you get past Sioux City, there's nothing. I mean,
nothing. That's the direction. That's the route I took.
Okay. You have to commit. It's like, we were right at that 6 o'clock at night range where we're like, do we stop for the day, or are we committing to 4 more hours of driving? And
it's 4 more.
And it was 4 more. And we didn't know we were committing to 4 hours. We thought we'll drive 2 more hours. We'll stop at 8. But there were no choices at that point. So.
Right. Also, there was flooding. So that's probably why it rerouted you, because there was flash flooding. And I ran into the same thing, and I'm driving, and what I hate about it, like I plug in the route, and then I listen to it, and I don't think, I no longer look at maps or anything like that. And my wife will be like, "Why aren't you taking the interstate?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I only took the Siri way."
I do what Siri says.
Yeah, Siri said turn. And she guides me down a gravel road for 46 miles, like this 2-lane gravel road. And I'm like, I'm so mad. This washboard road, and I'm shaking up all my work and getting dirt. It was a nightmare. But
I've been in the same situation where it's like, how the hell did I get here? And you don't want to turn around, and there's no such thing as paper maps anymore. So it's like, what do you do when you're stuck? And then you get driven into an area where your cell signal sucks, and then you're really just stuck.
Oh, yeah. Totally. Like music stops streaming. So leaving for this trip, it was 13 hours, but then you gain an hour. And then I'm like, I can push it. So I left at 6 a.m. and thinking, add about 45 minutes to an hour for stopping and stretching, and make sure you don't die. You don't want to die on the road.
Clots in the legs.
Yeah. So I'm sitting there like, but I'm gross. I'm super gross when I'm by myself. I'm like, well, I'm not going to drink water. And if I do, I've got this, I've got my large cup. Yep. I mean, I make the best time when I'm by myself, but I don't like to share that too much with my, my entire community, like I just did.
Like you just did.
Yeah, there you go. I pee in cups, everybody.
You got your pee cup.
Yeah. Oh, it's so gross.
I don't think you're saying anything all that unique, Will. I think there's a lot of us that've got the pee cup in the door. You got a little
pee cup posse out there, right? So yeah, I made great time. I stopped in Fort Morgan, Colorado. So I had an hour left.
Believe it or not, I also have a Fort Morgan story for you. Fort Morgan is nothing, right?
No, it's just a cow shit smelling town. It's like a factory farming, and I mean, it's really not a pleasant stop. If you live there, I'm sorry, not for being mean, but that you live there. I'm sorry that you do that. That's a bad thing to do. Don't do that.
You're just an hour from Denver, for crying out loud. Why are you living there?
Oh, I mean, unless you're slaughtering hogs. Good God.
Well, my Fort Morgan story is we got stuck in the mountains coming back this last week, and there were 2 times that we were stopped cold in the middle of I-70.
Traffic?
The traffic was completely stopped. Yeah. And, sat for like 45 minutes each time. So we hadn't gotten as far as we wanted to get that day. So we get down the mountain, go through Denver, and Renee's like, it's okay. I've got the last 3 hours. We'll clock the last 3 hours here. We'll get, to Nebraska. So I'm passenger, and all of a sudden the van starts shifting lanes on us. I'm like, what's going on? She's like, it's getting windy. And I'm like, yeah. And the cloud, it's like black up there. So I look at the navigation and I see what's going on with the weather. Sure enough, we're going to drive into a big ass storm.
Yep. I drove into the same one. I had an art show friend that was like, hey, heads up, tornadoes. And I quickly dialed in our good friend, David Mayhew. Is that dude the best dude to have as a friend?
Like somebody just told me there's a storm coming. David, is that true? Is this real?
Right. Yeah. And he's like, yeah, you've already taken my work down. I'm like, oh my God, it's real.
So I'm looking like a half hour ahead, and I think, okay, Fort Morgan, great. Start looking for hotels on the phone while Renee's trying to keep a hand on the wheel. And apparently there was some weird, event going on in this small town, and all the hotels were sold out except they had one room at the Baymont Inn, and it was disgusting. And
is that you got a little pock marks there on your neck there? Is that the bed bugs still crawling out of your sweatshirt?
There was some kind of a loud, either a quinceanera or a wedding going on the main level, and they're one of their rooms, and it went on until 10:30. Front desk says, no, we're shutting them down. It's after hours. And we fall asleep after all that noise. And then the fire alarm goes off. Somebody had pulled the fire alarm. So we were up until at least 2 a.m. So Yikes. That was a shitty drive home.
Yeah. We've been alluding to Denver and not naming the show that we were at, but we were at the Cherry Creek Arts Festival, lucky enough to both be juried into that gem.
It was great. Yeah.
Yeah, incredible. Thanks to all the folks that put that on, Amy and Tara and your cast of volunteers and employees and folks. I mean, just did an incredible job. There's a reason they call that the gem. I mean, it's the one. So thanks for an incredible weekend there. I can't thank you enough there.
I agree.
All right, so you're talking about up till 2 a.m, and I was dealing with insomnia, and it happens to me from time to time going into a big show that I've had a lot of anxiety getting ready to go into the show and all this stuff, and so first night I'm staying in this lovely hotel downtown, walking distance to the show, still nothing, like 2 hours of sleep, go to bed at 2, wake up at 4. I mean, I was just wrecked.
Yeah.
And so I decided that I was talking to some friends at dinner, and they're like, "You are in the great land of Oz, sir. Why not eat this gummy?"
There you go.
And take the magic pill.
Isn't that how everybody gets it nowadays? Is through the good old fashioned sugar gummy?
Yeah, sure. Why not? It's less than your lungs. I'm not a big pot guy. I gotta admit, I'm not. That's not my vice. So I was like, okay, I'm going to grab my book and I'm going to read and take this thing. Typically, I'm smarter than this, maybe, but not this night. And I just popped the whole thing and started reading. And then I drifted off to sleep. And about 30 minutes later, I get this shock waves of just like I could actually see light in my brain shooting past my eyes. And I had the worst panic attacks of my entire life. I was up the entire night.
So you were trying to help the sleeplessness, and you only made it worse.
I just killed myself. And this is going into Sunday. I was like, well, this is what I'm doing for the rest of the night. And I tried to rest, and I could not. I got like no sleep at all. So panic attacks wore off about 3:30, and then it felt like it had about 12 cups of coffee. So F you, indica strain. I did not enjoy you. Supposedly that's the mind numbing as opposed to the sativa,
which is like more stimulating, right?
That's your Betty Yeager. Yeah. That's your Betty Yeager strain.
Let's go to work.
That keeps your mind. Let's get to work. Let's hammer this stuff out. This indica thing is supposed to shut your brain off, but man, it did not work that way for me that particular time.
Wow.
So, careful what you eat, folks. Mind your manners.
Jeepers. That's crazy, man. I mean,
all right,
I don't know why I said jeepers.
Yeah, you're not allowed to cut that. You got to leave it in. You said jeepers.
For Christ's sake.
See what I'm dealing with, folks? See what I'm dealing with?
I tell you.
So I made it home. It took me 2 days to get back because I lost an hour and I had my kids with me. I picked them up in Denver. Made the transfer with their mom and drove the kids back. And so we stopped in Norfolk, Nebraska and had an impromptu fireworks display out of our hotel window as the entire town erupted into celebration. So
was it actually on the 4th that you were making this drive home?
Yeah. So, I mean, the show, Cherry Creek, goes till the 3rd, left on the 4th.
Nice.
Stopped the night of the 4th.
I don't think we saw any fireworks at all, anywhere.
No?
Didn't even happen upon them anywhere. No.
Yeah. Huh. Weird. Where'd you stop?
Well, our first night we went west, so we were up in Silverthorne, and
That's an interesting way to go to
Wisconsin.
That
was an odd,
you headed
odd
west.
way.
All right,
yeah.
Fill us in here.
Yep. So we had somebody kicking our tires for our top of the food chain piece that we travel around with every
Nice.
show. And we
showmaker.
really thought it was going to happen. We felt like they were going to pull the trigger. Well, the end of the show comes Monday night and it hadn't happened. So we're like,
okay,
dang, it's not going to happen. Okay,
right.
Fine. So we get all broken down and I get a phone call. It's them. They're saying, hey, so we're in Golden and we'd really love it if you could bring that big piece out to our house and kind of set it up so my wife could see it because she hadn't seen it. Her husband was the one who had.
They're in Golden, Colorado.
Golden, Colorado.
Right.
And
reasonable.
So we're like, yeah, sure, that's great. Except, We didn't know they were going to want this home visit, and it's like 28 boxes of pieces in the back of our van. So we basically drive to their house, unload our entire van for them, do a little show, and they liked it. And they were like, but we don't want it here. We would really like it in Malibu.
Okay.
Their other home. I'm like, oh, okay, great. And I'm like, well, when we get home, we could ship it to you. And they're like, oh, is there any way we could just get it to Malibu by the weekend? And I'm thinking, well, there's like no way I can ship it to them to Malibu by the weekend.
Right.
And then the business side of me thinks there's always a way to get it to Malibu before the weekend.
Sure.
I said, well,
let's do this.
Sure, let's talk. I mean, whatever. So he said, throw out a price. I threw out a price. It made us happy. He was happy. So off to Malibu we go.
Yeah.
So
excellent.
We had a very nice experience driving it out there, seeing Malibu, spending some time in Malibu, and then driving home. So that was unexpected.
Did you guys go? Yeah, did you go west through like Telluride and Utah and all of that?
Yeah.
That's incredible. I love that drive. That's an amazing drive.
The hills, the mountains were gorgeous. You know, after 5 days of 12-hour days on the road, I was ready to get out of the van and not get back in.
Yeah,
for a
you
long
guys
time.
didn't go to Malibu and hang out. You just went, dropped, and turned back around, or did you get to enjoy it a little bit?
Yeah, we installed it like early afternoon, and then we spent the whole rest of the day doing fun stuff. I know it doesn't sound
the rest of the day, like 2 hours.
I think you can understand this. We have commissions waiting at home that we've committed to that we are just like. They're chomping at the bit. So we're like, we got to get home and we've got other shows to get ready for. So
I don't like it. I don't want to do shows anymore. I just want to go to Malibu.
It's kind of like, the Griswolds. How long do we stand here and look out at the ocean?
Yes, man. I always try to put in a couple days. I can't do that. It just makes me crazy. It makes me feel bad about myself. If I'm driving all the way somewhere and I got to try to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Try to see something. I don't know.
Oh, we saw stuff.
I'm not criticizing. I'm just a different. I feel like, you mentioned way back when, I think first season, you were talking about we talked about being beach people versus non-beach people and how you feel like kind of crazy after,
sitting there for a while. Yeah.
Yeah. Not me. I am remarkably adept at doing nothing.
You can just
oh yeah, I can
pull out the book and just get lost in it.
Absolutely. Oh, 6 days, is that all I have to just sit on my ass? And I was like, I don't know if I can properly meld with the beach chair in 6 days. I might need 8. So no, I can do me some nothing. But hats off to you for turning back around and getting back to work. But that makes me want to kill myself.
Yeah. Well, getting back in the studio today, that was the first day back in the studio. It's like we haven't blown glass in a year or something. It was like all of the joints are rusty. Nothing was where I wanted to grab it. It's kind of like juggling. You kind of lose that sense of where that ball's going to land. And it was a hard day.
So much. That's what she said. You just softball them in. There's just so much. You pointed it out last time and I couldn't do it. And I just want to be.
So actually, we do actually make time to do fun stuff after shows. The last time that we did Denver,
sure,
we looked up fun things to do in the mountains.
Is that what you Googled? You just Googled fun things to do in the mountains?
Okay, fine. There's another one for you.
I wasn't saying that.
Okay, whatever.
That wasn't even going there.
Okay, things to do in Denver, things to do in the mountains, whatever. And they were advertising for this hot springs spa in Idaho Springs. Have you ever been there or heard about it or anything?
Oh yeah, I've been to hot springs before. Sure. There's a great one in Santa Fe.
Exactly. We envisioned that we were going to go sit at the top of a mountain with Shirley MacLaine and Sedona.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? This
right.
spiritual experience. Well, we get there and it's like a YMCA campgrounds or something. And we paid for this private spa package, which don't ever buy the spa package.
Not till you see it.
We get there, we check in, and they say, okay, well, you can check into your room, come back, and lead you off to the special private spa bath.
Okay.
So they point us in the direction of where we're going, and we start walking down these stairs, and Renee's like, why are we going underground? And it's like this cinder block basement right out of Silence of the Lambs, right?
Yeah. That's what I was going to say.
Renee gets like 4 steps and she's like, oh, hell no, I'm not going down there. I'm like, but we paid for this, right? We paid to do this special thing. She goes, I would pay extra to not do it.
Right. So did you do it?
So she goes back to the room. I go down to check it out. I go, and literally this room was like this creaky, old, dirty. The water was like, jeez, I was like, could they pour a little chlorine in there and kill some of the bacteria that's probably floating? No. It was a disaster. It was a nightmare, but it was a good effort at doing a little relaxing after the show anyway.
Have you tried Yelp? Have you tried it? Oh, man. All right. Good times. This episode of the Independent Artist Podcast is brought to you by Zap, the digital application service where artists and art festivals connect.
So I've started using the events list feature in Zap to search up some different shows to fill those holes in my schedule.
You know, I feel like I should have something to say, but I wasn't really listening to you because I'm looking at the events list right now, and It's pretty cool. Okay, so you drop the menu down, and there at the bottom, go scrolling all the way, about third thing down in the smaller print, it just says events list.
That's right. All of the shows appear here regardless of their application deadline. You can use the filtering and the sorting to narrow down your search so that you can find that right show that fills your desired time frame or location.
I know a lot of people love that calendar. I like seeing the list of events. I like scrolling through and doom scrolling late at night. It's like online dating. They don't let you swipe left or right, but you can figure out who you want to date in the coming up year.
All right, let's get on to the topic of today's show, shall we, sir?
We shall.
All right, so Douglas and I are going to answer a bunch of questions from emerging artists. This may, a lot of the our veteran friends that have been doing this for a long time might have, I'm sure they have completely different ideas.
Exactly.
This is just us leaning on 22 years of experience from craft to fine art to illustration to wall installations. These are, some of you might be screaming at your radios here and being like, that's not how I do it. And it's like, guarantee you it's not how everybody does it.
And there's no one right way. I mean, this is really just what has worked for both of us. That's our impressions.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is through my experience. And every week somebody comes on here, every other week when we do this show, somebody comes on here and gives me some kind of aha moment of something that I'm not doing or I could be doing better. But
we really don't want to come across as an authority for what other people should do. It's really, we are authorities on what we know for ourselves and what's worked for us. And we're willing to share from our point of view, but please don't take it as gospel because it might not work for you. It might be the wrong advice for you.
It's wrong. In fact, you've given me bad advice and I'm very angry with you right now. I don't like you anymore. All right, let's get on to it. We wanted to do this. We've been talking about doing this show for a while, and the idea for the show kind of got jogged by I'm mentoring someone from the Park City Arts Festival and got hooked up with, Renee Podber sent me this woman and she's super talented and had a couple of quick questions. And I'm like, okay, I looked at, you ever look at some of these emerging artists and you're like, you're better than me.
Oh, right. Yeah, right.
You might need a little polish, but I mean, as far as the booth stuff, but she's awesome and has some really great questions. And two, right off the bat, that I wanted to jump into with this show, but we are just taking emerging artist questions and don't feel like if you're out there listening that if you have not had your question sent in that you missed the boat on this. I think it's a type of thing that Doug and I could make a segment on the show if we got enough questions. We'd be happy to jump in and answer those. But the first question was about inventory, and Chris Dahlquist actually sent that to us as well and was like, hey, I'd love to hear you guys talk on this one for a while and see, like, how much work do I bring to a show? What do I do here? Like, what do you do? So how do you and Renee deal with inventory and how much stuff you need to bring to a show?
Well, in the beginning, that was a huge stress for us. I mean, it was basically like we wanted to prepare for everything in the kitchen sink. We brought too much shit. And it really, you learn pretty quickly what you're going to need. And my advice to an emerging artist would be just have a good display of your booth and maybe a handful of backup stuff. because as much as we want to feel like we're going to show up to a show like that and like clean out, it's really, if it's one of your first few shows, think of it as a learning experience. Don't think of it like I've got my golden ticket and I'm going to like cash in the lottery winnings, So don't stress yourself out with making so much work that you kind of get in the way of preparing in other areas is my advice.
Okay. I have 3 answers.
Sure.
When you're first starting out, my biggest piece of advice is have a monster on the back wall of your booth. Have a huge piece that is your anchor, and everybody's version of a monster in the back of their booth is completely different.
You also call it the top of the food chain piece, right?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Always. You got that top of the food chain piece. Do something in the back of the wall that's going to bring people in that you don't think you can even sell. That's your nicest and biggest or most impressive piece. Now, if you're a jeweler, that's the one big honker in the middle of your case. If you're a painter, that's your one big thing. It's for you guys, it's your towers. Probably, right? Would I say? Or maybe.
Yeah,
right.
Definitely.
So you've got that big guy in the back that's going to bring everybody in, right?
And also the thing that you're happy to carry around for a while so that it's worth it when it sells, but it sells a lot of your other stuff,
Exactly. And then you're going to have somebody come in that's like these big high rollers who are going to fall in love with you. They're going to fall in love with your work, and they're going to come in and they're going to be like, I love this artist. I want their nicest piece. And they're going to buy it, and that's going to make your show.
For sure.
However, and you have to work yourself up to it, or maybe not. I don't know.
I really feel like, people get hung up in the ratios and the numbers of how to price the work. Like some people will say by the inch or by the this or that. I'm like that. Throw that out the window. For me, what's always worked is what the market will bear. If you sell the piece, you get kind of selling similar work at a clip. Start bumping it up until you kind of start getting that tension of when it won't sell.
So that's a totally different question because we're going to get to that one later on, but that's how to price your work.
Sure.
How much inventory though? So the other way to look at it is how I've done this for a long time. And up until this year has been, I look at it as hangings. And if I have whatever size my booth is, I want to be able to hang my booth 2 to 3 times, which means if I sell the big guy, I've got something to replace it with. If I sell 2 of these small ones, I have 2 of the small ones to replace it with. So a full hanging, double it, and then you can replace the booth. You're not going to look picked over.
But do you think for like a new person who's just getting out there their first year, that is maybe a little ambitious?
No.
Okay.
I think that's the minimum. I think that's the minimum. I think because you don't want to look picked over. I had a very dear friend tell me this one time that if I sold out, I'd failed because it's either I didn't bring enough work or I didn't price it correctly. How do you feel about that?
Well, which friend am I going to offend if I say it's bullshit?
Fuck her. She doesn't care. Yeah.
I mean, it's all information for the future. I mean, obviously, if you sell out and you can be like, okay, well, next time I can up my prices,
Yeah, you're not going to feel bad if you sell out. Nobody is.
For sure.
And I've seen people sell out at shows and I'm not like, they did a bad job. I'm like, get over yourself. Yeah, they crushed it. They did an amazing job. And some of those shows you're going to come by and you are going to do that, but it doesn't happen often. But I don't necessarily believe it. I'm in the business of selling my work, but so that's the second way, is to have like a number of hangings. I sure as hell don't have 3 hangings right now. I barely have 1. And am I going to cancel my show? No, I'm still going. So then the third way to look at it is a dollar amount. All right. And that's another way to look at it. And I feel like, there are all sorts of things, and this is going to be up to your business model, I guess, but there are all sorts of ways for you to look at it. But I'm looking at, I want to have $60,000 to $100,000 worth of inventory. That's how I want to look at it.
Okay. And whatever combination of sizes, whatever gets you to that number.
Whatever combination. Yeah. And so I figured out what my hot selling size is, and I have 3, and I really only bring those That's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm not telling you what they are because I don't want you copying me.
Well, talking numbers like that, I mean, a lot of people want us to talk numbers. And I sometimes wonder if that, if numbers just make people feel bad, because numbers are hard amongst different mediums and different things. Like you mentioned, somebody might be like, how the hell does anyone sell a piece that expensive? And it's a struggle. I mean, sometimes we do, sometimes you don't. And all the times you're second guessing yourself and wondering, am I doing it right? Even when we've been in this business for 22 years. But yeah, the numbers thing, kind of is, you talk to a photographer, their number is going to be different than a jeweler, is going to be different than a painter or a glass blower. So anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Like jewelers, I talked to my wife before I came in here. She feels like you have to have 10 times the inventory for the amount of money that you want to make. I don't, that's how she felt like as far as a jeweler goes. She has to have, and it depends on the market you're going to. Have you been to the market a bunch of times? Mm-hmm. Have you shown a number of times at the show? And if it's a big show for you, well, you better bring something new. Have you never gone to Milwaukee before and you're showing at Lakefront for the first time? It's like, well, lean into your old stuff or your new, whatever makes you happy in your booth. So it all kind of depends. But I do think that is the three different ways you can look at it.
Yeah, what to bring for a mount.
Yeah, the bright light to bring in the moths, and then you've got all of the other things to look at once they come in. The hangings, how many different hangings, how many times can you hang your booth? You don't want to be inundated with this just like nonsense, like constant. I mean, I don't deal in really small things anymore just because it takes me just as long to do a small piece as it does a large one.
And it takes just as long to sell a small piece as it does a large one. I feel like when I get tied up talking to somebody over a $100 piece, I've just missed the opportunity to connect with somebody who wants to buy a $2,500 wall set from us.
Yeah, I do agree there. But I mean, you have to, if you're by yourself, then sometimes you have to just, and I have often said to somebody, hey, I'm by myself here. I'd love to talk to both of you at the same time. I don't want you guys to get offended that I'm talking to somebody else. Let me, maybe if you guys have questions or questions about this, you can jump in too. And I just try to treat it like a room full of people. But, if you
can't way to handle it.
Yeah. Yeah. If you have small stuff that's moving, then you have to, it's almost like you have to have two people. Like some of these shows that allow me to have reproductions, and I think there are really only 3 that I bring them to. Okay. Even some of the ones that do allow me to have them, I feel like they get in the way, so I don't bring them. But some of the ones, I'm like, okay, let me talk to everybody. But sometimes you're on and you get your taps on your toes and you just get
you're
going.
Everywhere.
And you just talking to everybody and you're performing and it's all working, but sometimes it can really muck you down.
It's like Julia said, being a bartender, you're getting that shot, you're getting this one over here, and you're juggling. Oh, yeah. You're just totally juggling, folks.
Exactly. But then all of a sudden somebody wants a shot of Pappy and it costs $250 and you're like, got to talk to this guy a little bit more than I'm not just slinging Chardonnay. Got to give it to him. All right, next
question. Is how exactly do we pick the shows we want to commit to? I mean, that's a big question right there. Like, how do you decide? We come at it from a different point of view because we've been doing shows for 22 years and we know what works and what doesn't work. But for a new person who's trying to vet a show and figure out, do I give this one a try or that a try? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. And, I don't care if I make people mad. Here goes. Figure out who you sell with. You know what I mean? Like walk around other mediums or other artists that you sell well together. Okay, yeah. Together. I mean, how many times have I installed and I've seen somebody else hanging on the wall? And, how many times have I hung in the same house and I've looked over and I've seen a faux bot in the corner, a Sarah Collier on the wall or somebody else, where I'm kind of like, they're not my competition. They are my, they're just part of the collection.
Sure.
I see a Grushchenko and I'm like, okay, cool. Let me look at their schedule and see where they're going. So if you're first starting out and you walk a show and you see who you think you would hang well with, or even look at the website, be like, man, let me check out some of these shows. And then you look at the shows, see if it looks like something that you might want, you kind of look at the artists that go to them and you see if you are of the same caliber.
Well, that's the hard part right there, is for as a new artist to kind of get a clear perspective on your work.
Right.
I mean, to be able to be like, to figure out where you fit. And sometimes you have to look at yourself a little more critically and challenge your work a little bit more than when you first start out. You should really, like you said, look at the website and see who's already been exhibiting there, because that tells you if you're wasting your time or if you're showing up and it's just tchotchkes, on the flea market table.
Well, and to be honest, sometimes those tchotchke kind of things are, and I don't want to be shitty about somebody else's work. Sometimes the smaller collectible craft. I mean, my parents have a huge collection of small collectible American craft, and they have for years. And that's how I kind of found part of this industry is through being taken to craft shows when I was little and falling into that. But they've got these little carvings and these other little things. Really nice collection. Some dolls, some Akira Blount. My big paintings may not sell in the same place that some of these smaller collectible craft does.
Right.
So I'm looking at the show and imagining myself where I am. And, who knows? Sometimes you want to be that big fish, Well,
I do want to say sometimes there's a lot of emphasis put on only doing the A shows. Like if I don't do the A show, if someone doesn't only do the A shows, then they're somehow, they look down on themselves, or that's what they aspire to. But there are a lot of all quality, all kinds of shows that people make really good livings at. So to kind of like step back from that, if I only do the A shows, then I will have arrived and make a good living for myself. You can do that.
Way.
You can do that just about anywhere.
Right. I have some very good friends in Denver that don't apply to Cherry Creek because they're like, man, I never made any money there. And they end up doing their work as a little out there, a little bit edgy, and kind of, I mean, there's plenty of edgy work there too, but they just couldn't make it work. And so they're not really doing what they would typically say are the A shows, even though they can get into them. They're grinding it out at some of these other shows that are 10 times better for them than some of the shows that I love.
Yeah.
So you got to look at your work, look at the website of the show, see if you think it fits. If that's what's there at the show, maybe it's just not for you. Maybe you need to go somewhere else where they're going to appreciate you more.
The other thing I would say about that is about picking your shows is we really need to be skeptical about what we're committing our time and money to. Like sometimes once you start doing shows, you're going to get lots of letters about wonderful opportunities for shows that you can get in, and they appeal to a market or whatever, and they do a good line on you. But it's really up to you to look into where's the show, look at the website, and figure out, am I going to be wasting my time on this opportunity that they're giving you? You know what I'm saying? Right.
That's a great point. And it brings me to something that I wanted to bring up for our friend David Bjerstrom, who is the director over at Art in the High Desert, as well as an award-winning artist everywhere from season 1. You can check out his talk, but he had a great point and kind of a pet peeve to bring up. Do your research ahead of time. And a lot of shows, they count on you once you have even applied. And, I've certainly declined a number. I have a lot of things that I'm juggling. A lot of times try to put together a tour where you go out from the East Coast.
And like how they will announce, and what you get in and what you don't get in affects other puzzle pieces. So it's not as cut and dried as being afraid of declining a show that you get into.
But his point was, do your research ahead of time.
If you have no intention of going to it, then don't even apply.
Right. Anybody, get into the show and then get online and be like, has anybody ever heard of the Hearing Aid Festival at Cracker Barrel in Wisconsin? And it's like, okay, buddy, that's, you already got in, and it's not that one. Has anybody ever heard of Cherry Creek? And then it's like, Yes, we've heard of that. And meanwhile, people, old time pros that have, got rejected, and they're like, yeah, I've heard of it.
I've fucking heard of it.
Yeah, that's great. Because you're clogging up the works.
Yeah.
It's like you don't have any intention of driving. Well, I live in Boston and I want to drive all the way to Denver. Then why'd you apply?
Right.
Exactly. It's like, why'd you apply? Do your research ahead of time. But, I'm not trying to be mean to the, I'm just trying to express some good old Bjurstrom rage.
You're channeling him, right?
Right. No, but seriously, he's got such a fantastic point there. It's just like, do your research ahead of time before you even apply. Sometimes I'm declining shows because I'm like, okay, if I do get into, I get into Winter Park, then I'm going to stay in Florida. I don't get into Winter Park, I'm going to try to do Texas.
Sure.
So if you get all the Texas shows, I'm going to ignore the Florida shows. If I do all, vice versa, or, hey, I got into this one that I do really well in Chicago, I'm going to stick around and see what I can fill that schedule out with. So,
I mean, even when you look at artists who seem to be operating at a very high level, they get their rejections, they get their wait lists, and they get their acceptances. And the schedules are never set in stone. So if anything, that's part of the whole juggling act.
Yeah. And if you sell everything and you get to cancel.
Yeah. Okay. Well, another question that was sent in is just kind of like the question about the work. Like, how do you really know what to make that's going to be successful to do at a show and all that kind of stuff? What kind of direction do people take with their work? I mean, how do they figure that one out?
Those first couple of shows, just listen to the people and see what they say, and just, follow your heart and come up with your body of work. But that honestly just takes time.
It does.
I mean, I painted everything. The first show that I did, it's like, I got a guitar and a squirrel, and that's a gun, and this is a man, and there's a lady. It's just, I don't know. It's a bummer. I can't tell you that one.
I that's what I was going to come down to right there is just the reaction from the audience. I mean, let the audience direct you to where, the Venn diagram we talk about, okay, they didn't like that and I like to make it, so I'll make something else I like and see if they like it too. So you can be within those overlapping circles.
Yeah. And just to repeat that Venn diagram, what can I make? What do I love making? And what do people buy?
Yeah.
Those are the three.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the next question is simply about applications. How do I know what to apply with, what to send in for my jury slide or for my application, for my Zap or what have you, if you're applying with a different way? You want to take that one?
So I guess first thing I would say is obviously apply with what you intend to show and the work. But exactly. Glass is hard to photograph, so I never skimp on having somebody professionally photograph my work. I know it's different for different mediums. Maybe a 2D artist might be easier for them to take their own images, but that is where you don't want to cut corners. You want to make sure that the work really presents as it is, and so that against other people who are applying, that you stand out.
Okay, so hire a photographer.
Mm-hmm.
That would be one thing. And then once you have the good images, okay, you got the 4 to 5 good pieces of the things you're going to show anyway. Get a good photographer. It's not you. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
You're not any good at it.
Mm-hmm. No.
You know what? You're just not. You're not. Did you go to school for photography? Because people did, and they know how to do it. So that's something that find one of your mentors or your people that are compatible with you or whatever, and ask them. And that's the kind of thing that we'll share. And if you've got a good photographer, then that works for you. I'm not gonna promote one versus the other because I know 100 that I could rattle off the top of my head, but find somebody out there that can shoot it. If you are 2D, go to one of these print houses that print things for you. Every town seems to have one, and have a high resolution scan of that piece, because that's so much better than a photograph of a 2-dimensional piece of work, and they can shoot it. Do that. There's my advice there, and just show them what you got and try to tell them, focus on the one thing that you think you're good at, tell a story, have it play out.
Have a point of view, definitely.
Yeah.
Have a theme, have the work.
Right.
Have it not seem like it's 4 different pieces from 4 different series, there has to be some kind of synergy and through line that makes it seem like this is the same artist and they have a story to tell from a point of view.
Right. There you go. Don't just send them the squirrel and the lady and the gun and the man.
Yeah.
Maybe the squirrel. And no. What are you saying, Douglas? I don't know. All right. Next. What's the next question?
We've talked a lot about the booth thing. And one of the questions that somebody asked specifically about applications and booth images is that they want the show directors to be more transparent about why they didn't get in. I mean, how do you feel about that whole aspect of getting, if you paid for a jury, application, should you then get a thorough critique of the work back? Should that be part of the deal?
No, not at all. It's just get over it. Move on.
I kind of
different show.
It's like when you audition for, a show, like if you're auditioning to be on stage or to be in a movie or whatever, they don't call you up and say, oh, you're too tall, you're too fat, you're too this, you're not, whatever. They just say next, and they cast the person who's going to be in. And that's kind of what the business we're in.
You know what? Look at the other work, right? Mm-hmm. Look at the work that did get into the show. And that's either going to tell you, or it's going to tell you that you were close and that you need to polish it up a little bit. Mm-hmm. If you are consistently not getting into the shows that you're applying to, then maybe you're not applying to the right shows.
Sure.
Maybe they're doing you a favor, or it's never a bad thing to throw a flyer at one of those shows that you've never gotten into. I'm going to keep applying to Jazz Fest till I get in. I've never gotten in.
When you say a flyer, what does that mean, a flyer?
I just mean like it's just a roll of the dice.
Okay, gotcha.
You can't, you're not going to win craps unless you throw the dice on the table. You gotta play. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I just want to be like, I don't, this one, they only have this number of artists. I've never gotten in. And some people are like, hey, I'm going to quit giving that show my money. Like, I get that too.
I get that, yeah. But the other thing too about the booth image that this person was asking about was like, just tell me, is it that I don't have pro panels? Is it that I have mesh walls? And I don't think that, the booth image is really, we've talked about this a lot. It's about context. It's about, is it a professional booth? But it's rarely about you didn't get in because you have mesh walls versus pro panels. It's really about your work. So take a hard look at your work and see how your work fits, or if you need to do something different, or if it's the right show for you. There's just a lot of questions about that.
Right. I don't think anybody's getting rejected for having mesh walls. I really don't think. I did maybe the stupidest thing that I've ever done. Well, let's not dig too deep into my past. One of my
wait a minute, you did this that was way more stupid than that.
We're gonna start getting things like, actually, I was at the show and I saw you. You did something even dumber. All right, so here's a dumb one that I did. All right, I wanted a super cool looking booth.
Yeah,
and I took some old pro panels and I cut the fabric of them off and I wrapped them in aluminum channel and wood. And basically just making my pro panels weigh 4 times more than they used to. And I haven't sold any more work. Other artists walk by and they're like, ooh, that looks cool.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah. Also, I need somebody to help me now. Like, I can't even do it by myself. Like,
it just made it harder.
It did. So don't waste your time. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. You know how much money some of these guys go out there and they make on the same old walls that everybody else has. It's not about that. It's about your work. So
that's right.
I do believe in upping your game and upping your display, but I just don't think once you get to a certain point it matters.
Yeah.
Hey, that does bring me to another question that somebody I'm mentoring had asked, and this is such a simple one, but also not that simple because where do you get your tent?
I've just, since I got my Flourish trim line, I've stuck with it. I love it. It's gotten me through a lot of storms. Granted, I do the stabilizer bars. I do cross bracing with ratchet straps. I make sure that thing is going nowhere. And I just replace parts over the years. So I'm a fan of Flourish.
Flourish. Okay. And these guys are not, we probably should have, talking about dumb guy versus smart guy. We should have probably gone out for some advertising here. We're not getting paid by these guys. But some of the big brands, they don't make Craft Hut anymore, but I've still got it. And like Craft Huts are like, way back in the day, early 2000s, had a Craft Hut that I've still just bought and replaced parts for, and Light Dome makes new tops for those and helps. So there's an artist garage group on Facebook, and I think that's exactly what it's called, Artist Garage Group, that really sweet deals will come along. Occasionally you can find your tents there. Your basic brand names are like Light Dome, Trimline, Flourish. Euramax has a pop-up, but they have an octagonal leg.
Those legs are beefier. They're really good. Yeah.
They're a lot more sturdy. It pops up like an Easy Up, but it is a lot heavier duty. And once you attach the stay bars and the big fat professional weights, then you've got a pretty sturdy tent. But some of those shows out there do not allow any kind of pop-ups because Easy Up, Easy Down is the thing that people say. But we've all been at shows. If the weather wants you, it wants you. I've been in Austin when I've taken my Craft Hut off of the stop sign a block away and been right next to a Easy Up that stayed up. It wasn't about weight. It was about where the little microburst hit.
Oh, sure. Yep. Mm-hmm. God.
So, but Artist Garage Group is a great place to start.
I'll drop that link. I'll drop that link in the episode notes so people can go to it if they want.
Also asking people, I've got 3. I got 3 tents that I will loan out. I've got a Trimline, and I got 2 Craft Huts, and I'm pretty friendly in spite of
he's
the
not
character
eating.
I play on the show. So, I don't know. We'll see.
So another question we got was, how long did it take us to feel like we made it, or that we got to a point where we could feel comfortable about making a living in this industry? 30 years, maybe.
So I mean, my story is I've had 2 different bodies of work. My ex-wife and I made a line of work together, and so she was already creating it, and I lost my job in publishing and was kind of bummed, and the paper I was working for went under, and I went home and laid out one of the pieces that she was working on instead, and it sold that weekend. And then so I made 2 for the next weekend, and then those 2 were the ones that sold. And so we kind of, that carried us through a body of work for almost 10 years. And when the economy hit, I already knew how to do art shows. So I started doing what I wanted, and I had a sketchbook full of ideas that I wanted to do and an illustration degree that I could lean on. And that's how I started. So I already knew. You apply to the big show, and then you bust your ass and get ready. And if it makes money, just, there was this one woman who was like, basically she wanted, what did she say? She was like, I want a pat on the head and just to tell me that it's okay. And I'm like, I'll be damned if I'm going to pat anybody on the head, but I'll tell you this, quit your damn job. Your work's going to get better. Take just a leap of faith if you've got it. And just, if you're getting into shows and you've got the display in the van, you're already ready, and just kick yourself in the ass and jump in there with both feet and do it.
There's something about feet to the fire that makes you figure shit out fast.
Yes.
That you need that kind of and the other thing too is if you've already been doing shows and you know that this is the right place for you. I mean, some people do shows and they're like, nope, not having any business with it. But for me, even though we did not have like a barn burner of a first sale, I still felt like it was almost like taking a drug. It was like there was a hit of something that I just wanted to keep chasing it. I wanted to keep going down it. I wanted to solve the problem. I got passionate about people's reaction to what I was making and putting out there.
Right.
So if you really thrive in that marketplace and you feel that sense of energy, that's going to help overcome all of the physical, mental, stressful hurdles that this business will throw at you, because at the end of it, you're like, that was good. That was great.
Right.
They liked what I did and they bought it and they get to live with it. And it's so exciting,
Well, once you get that first delicious shot of heroin, you just got to keep on feeding the monkey, Doug. You just got to keep on. Monkey wants more.
Yeah.
Monkey needs.
Yeah.
So no, it's a gambling problem for sure. And when it pays off, nothing feels better. But I do believe, like, if you're already selling, and I think if you give yourself that time, then, tell the man to shove it, take this job and shove it.
So, talking back to past episodes, for somebody who is kind of like, who's been in another career and wants to step into this business kind of full time, I think the episode that encapsulates that the most is season 2, episode 1 with Cindy Ohms. Her episode's titled Fully Awake. She talked about that whole struggle of her whole life, just feeling like she didn't have confidence to put her work out there and that it would sell and that she could make a living at it. And then when she did, she had a lot of stuff to figure out, but when she did and she kind of got it all together, it was great. So that's a good kind of a pep talk, that episode.
Yeah. All right. Get yourself a mentor too that can help you. But you got to be careful. You open yourself up to mentors and you're like, I had somebody this past weekend that showed me their work and I was like, oh my God. I was like doing this and like talking up shows and I'm like, he's like talking about
Are you saying they looked to you as a mentor and you were not impressed with the work? Is that what you're describing?
Well, it was just a show thing and I was talking up art shows because, you occasionally get these people that walk up to you and you're like, how do you do this? Like, how do you do this for a living?
Yeah.
And you're like, blah, 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 do this and do that. And I was just talking on and on like I'm prone to do. And he was like, well, show me your work. And well, maybe we should have done that first.
Before we had this long conversation.
Yeah, that's not for me. That's also for someone. Well, maybe.
Speaking of the whole mentoring thing, there is a program that's in the works, headed up with NAIA, that Diane French and Cindy Lerick are working on. I'll drop their contact information into the episode notes if this resonates with anyone. But they're trying to build a mentoring database. So people who are interested in being mentors can submit your name and they'll put you in a database, what you do, what kind of shows, where you're located. And then eventually, emerging artists will be able to reach out looking for a mentor, and they will pair you with somebody who seems appropriate. So
very cool.
So yeah, that's on the horizon.
Also, just to assure people, like mentoring sounds like, I don't know, I use the word mentor, and I feel like I'm going to have somebody in my shop and teach them how to make shoes. Like, yeah. Like suddenly I feel like Geppetto, all right, boy, you put a nail right here and hammer it in. It's like, no, it's not like that. It's like this lady texted me and like, where do I buy a tent? Go on this here. Hey, I found one. Okay, great. And then that was it. That's kind of like that. She has more, bring it. I'm gonna check out the booth at the show we're going to together, and I'm gonna maybe give some advice. But it really is not
complete hand-holding,
time consuming. Yeah, you're not. Depending on how you do it. I mean, I know Mark Winter was talking about mentoring some folks, and he's definitely taught some lessons and really gone extensive. And I don't know.
Lessons on how to make work, that kind of thing, or
I believe so. It's in that Mark Winter episode that we did. Just to harken back to the previous, but I did drop off the board of NAIA just a couple of weeks ago, and that had been kind of a passionate idea. I'm an idea man, Douglas.
Yes.
I can't. I'm like this project itself and my career and kids and everything else. It's too
you've
much.
Got so much on your plate, and everybody appreciates everything you do for the podcast. So yeah, something has to give, So
I didn't have any time for it, but definitely appreciate what everybody there is doing. So, there are lots of different ways that people have kind of climbed the ladder and tried to figure things out. And one artist asked us, they felt like they'd kind of missed the emerging artist boat, and they kind of feel like maybe that's a ripoff because they've been chipping away at the stone and figuring out the display on their own and figuring out the tent. And is it too late to do the emerging artist thing, or Is that really the question? And I'm not sure. What do you think there?
Well, we actually talked about this last night at the NAIA board meeting. And if people feel like, they've already done some shows and they might benefit from being part of the Emerging Artist Program, they should call the directors and ask them if they're a good fit. If their experience disqualifies them or not, they might have a lane for them. Some people just want the reduced booth fee, the economic help. And my thoughts on that is, if your work has already been seen for a while, if it's got some sense of polish because it's, you've evolved through what people have seen and blah, 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 well, then maybe you don't even really fit in this emerging category anymore anyway. So you're going to be displaying your work amongst people who are just getting their footing. And if the audience will walk and look at the emerging section and already put you in a different mindset of than where you actually are in your career. I mean, that's just my thoughts on the matter.
Yeah, I mean, honesty, really. I mean, the show directors or the person in charge of the emerging program be like, look, send them an email and be like, look, I've been trying to do this on my own, and I've had several shows under my belt, and I really could use some help. And I'd like to do the emerging program if you think I qualify for it, because I feel like I'm really missing some key information here. And yeah, just ask them. You're like, no, Will, you can't get into the emerging artist program. You've been doing 15 to 25 shows a year for the past 22 years. And we're like, but I didn't get in, and I really want to. No, that's not. It's not about people trying to, break rules or whatever. It's about people trying to get some help.
So here's another question. And this kind of comes to some veterans and emerging artists. But, when you get to a point where your work kind of hits a wall and you're not either getting into shows or you're not selling, how do you kind of get through that impasse?
Wow. Maybe they're just not that into you.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I guess our business, we talked about it earlier. There's always this element of moving forward, of trying new stuff,
Right.
of growing. And if the work isn't selling, it does not mean that the show is sucky,
Right.
I mean, I sometimes feel like that is the go-to. You've got your artist friend who's not doing well. Clearly they're not doing well. I'm not going to rub it in that I am doing well, or I don't want them to rub it into me when I'm not doing well. So,
Right.
Of course, the common denominator is, well, this show sucks. Or is it? Is it really just that you need to make a change in your work?
Yeah, and I do think that goes back to one of the earlier questions. So we kind of have. I'm gonna give a similar answer to something that they asked us early on. Like you're just starting out, and yeah, you've got the booth, and you've got the lady and the squirrel and the gun, and everybody's gravitating toward the gun, and they're like, okay, well, what are you saying here about this? This is interesting, and well, maybe you lean into that topic, and the next booth, if you have time before the next show, then maybe your next piece explores that direction, because clearly it's something you love anyway. Well, let me work more into this and hone my body of work. We're like, okay, and then you show that next piece, and they say, well, this is interesting about this, and maybe you can combine elements of those pieces until you've figured out. I'm sure that your first glass blowing installation piece, where you have those to forgive me for calling it not like a plate, but it's like this wavy kind of piece that you put on the wall that installs with a number that becomes this installation. You probably, I'm guessing, just made one the first time.
Right.
And then somebody came along and said, hey, can I buy 2 or 3 of these? And you're like, oh my God, it sparks the imagination. So listen to your people.
We had self-limiting beliefs that people would only want the one. And then the collectors pushed us in a direction that let us know that we could up the scale.
Yeah. And I can't say this enough. And this so many of the veterans fall into this too. And you and I do sometimes too. People say really dumb things to us all the time, and you can't let that hurt your feelings. Try to figure out what they're saying to you.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're just saying like, okay, that's got to just bounce off my back. But sometimes if you look into why they're saying those things, they're trying to connect, or they're not trying to be rude. They're not trying to be ignorant. in spite of how it feels sometimes, just listen to what they say, and then that can be a stepping stone into, and don't just do what they say, but if they're responding to something and they're like, oh man, this is really interesting, or talk to people like, well, what's your favorite piece? And that can be a sales technique, but it can also just be a learning thing. You are trying to learn for those first few years, whether you like the industry, whether you're out there. I know I talked to Jaja the last few shows. He's been a guest on the show, and just the sweetest guy. And he's, going to his booth. It doesn't look exactly like it did the first time we saw him. Right. He's getting more professional, and dude can draw anything.
Sure.
Yeah. So he's experimenting with bringing his stories into new stories and trying to become more sellable, and still focusing on what makes him happy and drives his inspiration.
Sure. I remember when we first started, I wanted to chase any rabbit hole that the collectors would say. They'd be like, do you make light fixtures? Okay, I'll make you a light fixture. Do you want that? I'll make it. And it's like I was so knocked off my game at first because I wanted to do everything for everybody. And I thought that when they would ask that they were really serious. And it was possibly just part of the conversation for the day. And they might have walked out of the booth and never thought about us again. But somehow I wanted to reinvent what we make because of what that one person said. Right. So I think we need to be careful in the beginning that we aren't so impressionable that we really think that every conversation is going to lead to something. Sometimes they're just out for a walk and they say something nice about our work, and it doesn't mean they're going to buy it, It's
an ongoing dialogue, and you might not get a pearl for a bunch of hours, That's a really, really great point to kind of rein in my broad point. But I do think it's your job to listen and hear what people are saying and not get offended and not be like, God, what an idiot.
Well, what goes along with that is somebody had asked us, how do we keep them in our booth and make the sale so that, we don't lose them?
That's interesting. You can't hard sell art. I know some people do, but I do try to. Here's a good example. I had a client that came in and they were like, it's between you and somebody else. They'd been back several times. And I'm like, all right, let's freaking do this. All right. And I just became, I'm like, I just tried to tell them exactly who I am.
Right.
And who, what my inspiration is behind every part of it. And I try to be as likable as I can. And I try to just be kind. And if it comes down to them or me, the other person gets it, that's fine. But I tried to do everything I could to let them know who they were buying from and that it was, that I'm not a jerk.
Yeah.
And,
it kind of is almost like when you're forming friendships or you're into a new relationship or something.
Right.
You kind of have to be anticipatory. You have to be kind of...
I'm taking one of you boys home tonight. Which one's it going to be? Okay.
You kind of have to lean in, but then you can't be too much. You can't be like a blanket that's smothering them. No, don't leave, because that's the biggest turnoff of all.
Here's a great piece of advice that an old timer gave me when I was first starting out. I'd had a really bad show and I was going into the next show really needing some money.
Okay.
And he goes, trying to get paid is like trying to get laid when you're horny. He's like, they can smell the desperation on you.
Yeah.
So take it easy.
I feel like when they say, okay, I'm going to walk around, put out maybe some kind of a confident statement that, well, when you come back, we can talk about this, or enjoy the show. When you come back, we can talk more about it, or something that makes you sound confident that this is just the start of your conversation about the work.
Yeah. And I don't want to hear everybody using my lines, but I've got a good line for that I'm not telling. It works though, baby.
I have it wrapped up in the back waiting for you.
That's right. I got you. Taking me home.
All right. Hey, you mentioned earlier about your stepping into this world from another career. And that is, we were talking earlier about somebody else who wrote in a question about wanting to leave their career and when it's right and everything. I just know that when I started in this business in, the early 2000s, a lot of the people who are retiring now, they were just starting and it was their second career. They were starting it in their 40s and in their 50s. So this is really never too late of an industry to kind of like switch gears and start.
Yeah, when I retire from this, I'm going to go into human resources.
Yeah, right.
That does, I talk about like I'm not immune to people saying dumb shit, making me crazy. Don't get me wrong. That one does. Like, I'm going to do this when I retire. Like, have fun. Your back is going to be broken. You can have my walls. Have a good time. You're going to cut yourself on a craft hut.
Yeah, but at 40 years old, I mean, you still got a lot of life ahead of you. It's not like you're retiring and you're just like, now you're taking on a really hard job.
No, absolutely. People can do it at any age, I guess.
I mean, look at the Radkes. I mean, they left really great careers and they followed their passions.
Yeah, look at the Radkes. They're bitter, broken people. They're a mess. They can barely walk down the damn street. Well, it's not a young man's game.
Whether you're in this business or not, the 70s are coming, whether we like it or not. And
God damn.
Yeah.
I love you, Ma. She retired from shows. She can't come get me anymore.
That's right. So anyway, I mean, I recognize what the person who wrote in about the whole golden handcuffs. It's like, if you're used to a certain kind of life where you go to work and you got money that you have like budgeted in the bank and you know what you have to spend every month and everything is predictable. That's not this life. This life is all about a lot of other stuff, a lot of other things that are great and other challenges. So
better have some room on those credit cards. You want to jump into this game. Better have a little room. Don't come to me maxed out.
Yeah,
you got to have a parachute.
Yeah, I have to admit, when we started, we leaned heavily on credit. And it was scary. I think a lot of us do.
The worst thing about this business, I'd say, is that the rent is due for the entire year, pretty much in January, February. Mm-hmm. And there aren't any shows in January, February. So you got to have room on either have the money in the bank already, or you've got to have credit to put it on and wait and just pay the piper later on.
That's one of the huge challenges. That's true.
Well, the timing of this industry sucks too, because the rent is due in January, February, and then taxes are due right on the heel of that. So everybody's kicking the can, that I know, is kicking the can down to September till they've had a decent year. And then you do September and then you pay your taxes. And then all of a sudden you got no good shows after September, really. There's not, the kind of big shows have happened. Mm-hmm. And then you got October, November, December. Rent's due again.
Are you talking people into this industry, or are you?
No, it's a fucking nightmare. Are you kidding me? I love it, but it's a nightmare.
It is a nightmare. It has its challenges.
Yeah. Welcome. Come in. I'm your mentor now. It's me, Bert.
Here's another challenge that people are writing in about. They're saying, what do we do about shows who won't even follow their own rules? I mean, we've complained about the reproduction rule and buy, sell, and all that kind of stuff. I mean, what can we do?
That's a show-to-show basis. Yeah. You can get into a game where you're like chasing every cheater and I feel like that's going to ruin your show.
It does.
I don't want to, I know people are out there cheating, and I'll walk at a show and I'll see reproductions, and it's like, sometimes I see it and it's a friend of mine that's doing it. And I'm like, you know what? You're a dick, but I don't have the time to chase it. So maybe somebody else does. I don't know. It's not going to be me. It's going to wreck my show if I'm there like wagging my finger or whatever. But I don't know. I feel like that's a show-to-show basis. You put your faith in an industry, and you put your faith in somebody to do the right thing, and you hope they do it.
I think you have a really good point about not getting knocked off your game. I mean, there's really it's like, are we going to be the police at a show, or are we going to sell our work? And like, we can operate within kind of a peaceful, easy place. And that stuff can just be dealt with by other sources. It sucks that it happens, but it doesn't have to be our personal cross to bear.
And I know it is some people's, and that's great. And I admire some people that do it, but I don't want to get shaken off my game. I don't want to be I don't want to talk about the negativity. I'm only about the positive in my booth. I'm only, sunshine and rainbows, and that's all I want to be. It's a small man's game. Let the small people do the small thing and rise above it.
And our collectors, they sense when shit is off with us. If we're worrying that we're not going to sell, if we're mad because of what's going on in the booth across the way from us, why would we shoot ourselves in the foot that way? You got to shake that shit off and just really be present.
Yep, exactly. I mean, it's a bummer, but you just got to hope the show handles their business and you handle your own.
And it can be a decider for what you do in the future. Like, let's say a decision that was made for a bunch of buy-sell in a show. You can't change the fact that they're there, but you can change the fact if it's a good place for you to sell in the future.
Yeah, I've cut a couple of shows off my list because of that. I'm like, oh, well, this isn't the one for me. I don't want my work shown with that. So if they don't follow the rules, that's really the only recourse you have, right?
Totally.
So let them do their thing and I'll do my thing. All right. So somebody has a question here about how we choose the shows that we do. And I know how I look at it, but how do you go about choosing the shows and the markets that you want to be in, Doug?
Well, specifically, I think it comes down to like an informal rating that artists will give shows about wanting to choose the show that might be considered a top show, right? Because like if you get in, you're obviously got like the golden ticket and you're going to make bank.
Maybe. I mean, I definitely know, I was, we talked about Cherry Creek last weekend and my neighbor across the way had a bummer of a weekend. So it's not for everybody. But
plus you factor,
who knows?
If it's like cross country, 2,000 miles away. Well, you have to now pull out those expenses from what it needs to be for a good show for it to make a difference. And that time away from the studio of the work you're going to make, where maybe that weekend you would have made 5,000 less, 4,000, 2,000, whatever that number comes to, but you're not away from home and you have less expenses and the bottom line is appropriate. So,
Yeah. And we make a lot about, oh, this is an A show, this is a B show, this is a C show. It's like, somebody's A is somebody else's C. I mean, it just kind of depends on your own market. It's not like there are, these magic shows and everybody is going to make money. I mean, there are some of the ones that are more highly rated among artists, but everybody's got those back pocket shows that they do that they're like, I'm not telling you about this one.
Well, some of these other recommendation sites, like let's say Facebook or even like the different review subscriptions, magazines, they all have like, let's say, reviews written about a show and they rank it and they say what average sales are. And I used some of that stuff early on, but I came to realize pretty quickly that the responses were a handful. And, the results didn't match what my results were. So I almost feel like some of those resources that we can spend our money on to try and make our business better for ourselves actually is a hindrance.
Yeah, maybe. Or they could work for some people. I don't know. But I would say this, just get some friends, go onto some of these groups and be loud and proud about your ignorance and be like, hey, I'm new. I hope this is okay. Or search the function. I don't do Facebook anymore. But I know there, you can definitely do certain groups and ask people. I do find if the question has been asked a number of times, you might get some salty veterans or whatever. You're like, hey, anybody heard of Fort Worth?
Right.
And then you're like, God, get the hell out of here.
Yep.
Use the search function.
Yeah, but don't you feel like, too, a lot of the reviews that people put online about a particular show or whatever, maybe the more of the complaints go out from a handful of squeaky wheels, and it doesn't necessarily give the full picture because some people want to keep those hidden gems as their own special back pocket show.
Yeah. Also, it comes off as gloating too. If I'm, somebody, 10 people get on there like, oh my God, what a terrible weekend. And I banked. I'm gonna be like, not for me. I don't want to be that guy. Right. Just be quiet. Move on. Be like, hey, sorry you had a bad weekend. And then you might look at the artist list again and be like, well, this person's being awfully quiet, but they're there every year.
They only go back if it's working for you.
Yeah, like David Bierstrom was saying early on. I mean, he's like, do your research ahead of time before you even apply, and that way you'll know what you want. So, yeah, what else we got, man? We've been at this thing for over an hour and 45 minutes before you start cutting the fat. You want to end us out here with something, Douglas?
One last thing before we wrap this episode, this long episode we've had here, is I've been having conversations with artists lately, and this topic seems to keep coming up, and it's kind of this insecurity of their business model. Like whether
I'm never insecure.
Yeah, right.
My
never.
Wife is like, God, Jesus, the self-loathing.
Yes.
All right.
But basically the idea that, well, if I don't make a living out of my art or a good enough living off of my art, maybe other artists will look down on me or something like that. And I just feel like we are pro-artist in every regard. You know, whether you have a second career or a spouse that kind of picks up the slack, it's really about the doing of the art.
It is about I'm glad you brought that up. It is about the doing of the art, and it doesn't matter. And I catch myself falling into the same trope where I'll see artists that are doing better than I am at shows, and I want to try to keep up or something like that. And it's not. It has nothing to do with them. You have to look at it. It's like each 10 by 10. You know, you're walking down the street is its own individual storefront. You know, you're doing your best. You're growing. You're figuring it out. So yeah. I totally agree with you there. It's each business model is its own business model.
Yeah, I mean, so this whole episode has really been about us giving our reactions to what we've experienced. And, you know, some of it may be beneficial and some of it may be hogwash. So it's like whatever works for you. You really have to invent your own wheel. But these are just some of our insights.
Yeah, exactly. Little tidbits you can plug in, and I don't know. I've read. I wouldn't really call them self-help books, but whether they're meditative books or things like that, fuck it, self-help is fine. If you glean one thing from the book and you remember it and you carry it forward, then it's been worth it. And if you can adapt something that we've said here today, then great. I feel like a job well done. Otherwise, you know, just move on by and listen to your true crime. We'll see you next time, right?
That's right. Well, this has been fun. So thanks for having this talk with me, Will. This has been a great week.
Absolutely. Great idea. Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
This podcast is brought to you by the National Association of Independent Artists. The website is NAIAartists.org.
Also sponsored by Zapplication. That's zapplication.org. And while you're at it, find us on social media and engage in these conversations.
Be sure to subscribe to this podcast to be notified when we release new episodes.
Oh, and if you like the show, we'd love it if you would give us your 5-star rating and offer up your most creative review on your podcast streaming service. See you next time.